Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thanks everyone for coming out. I'm Dan Liebling. I'll be introducing Dave Zobel, who's here as part of the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. I know Dave through the Caltech Alumni Network. I was fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate enough, to sit through a screening of Sharknado with him as the narrator. I heard that he tried to write a book about the science of Sharknado, but he was going to get paid by the page, so it was going to be $0. That's my attempt at comedy. But Dave is a part-time comedian, part-time author. He is also was a software engineer. He worked on things like DBase back in the day. He told me he also, while writing his book, wrote some shell scripts to actually make the output into a Word document. So he still has some technical talent, at least. Finally, he also does things around the Los Angeles area, like Trash for Teaching, where he picks up old discarded hardware and puts these together in programs that help kids learn to use hardware and software. So really fascinating person. So today, he's here to talk about his book, The Science of the Big Bang Theory. So welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, all of you. I will start by making sure you understand not only who I am, but who I'm not. Let's see if I can make this work. Oops. We're sleeping. Wake up. I'm not Bill Nye the Science Guy. I'm not Steve Carell. I know you won't believe me, but a cop in LA really tried to convince me I was this gentleman. And what I usually get is this. Sam Waterston, the guy from Law & Order. I'm not him. Sorry. I'm a science humorist, which is basically a science writer. It's got the word science in it somewhere. It's really a science writer who's trying to be funny. Any of you have perhaps seen or read a book called Longitude about the race to build the first reliable chronometer for ships. That was written by someone who isn't me either. Her name is Dave Zobel, which sounds a lot like my name, but it's not exactly the same name, and it's not exactly the same person. And I have spoken with her, and it's my opinion that she is in far more terror of being mistaken for me than I am of being mistaken for her. Also, I'm not a writer for the Big Bang Theory. These are some of the writers for the Big Bang Theory, and as it happens, they are seated more or less chronologically according to how long they've been working on the show. So the two gentlemen on the left with the most fear in their eyes have been there the longest, and the happy people on the right had only been working there a few years when this photo was taken. They have a large number of writers, and none of them are scientists, and they're not even science writers, but they do write about science topics. Probably some of you are familiar with the show, so you know what I'm talking about. For the rest of you, I will quickly introduce some of the characters.
Sheldon.
Hi.
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 Hi. Well, welcome to the building.
Oh, thank you. Maybe we can have coffee sometime.
Oh, great.
Great.
Great. Well, bye.
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 Bye. Should we have invited her for lunch?
No, we're going to start season 2 of Battlestar Galactica.
There you go. See, you were thinking nothing was going to happen on this show, and it's already into its 8th season, but they were going to go watch Battlestar Galactica, so yay. Your three main characters here are from left to right, Sheldon, Penny, and Leonard. Originally, the show, I think, was going to be called Lenny, Penny, and Kenny. They changed it, which is nice, so we can maybe try to tell these people apart. Sheldon, the gentleman on the left, is a theoretical physicist. Penny in the center is an aspiring actor and sometimes waitress and sometimes sales rep. And Leonard on the right is an experimental physicist who is a specialist with lasers. If you would like to try to keep Sheldon and Leonard apart in your head, which I recommend, you can use a mnemonic like Leonard has the lenses and Sheldon has the sharper features, or Leonard is not lanky and Sheldon is not short, or Leonard is a laser head and Sheldon is a theoretical physicist. I shouldn't be unkind to Sheldon. He is not any weirder than any of his friends, and here are two of his closest ones.
So, you guys work with Leonard and Sheldon at the university? I'm sorry, do you speak English?
Oh, he speaks English. He just can't speak to women.
Really? Why?
He's kind of a nerd. Juice box?
So that was Raj and Howard. It's not all about just making fun of nerds on this show. There is really quite a lot of science.
But on the other hand, if things don't go well with Leonard, I risk losing a really good friend. I mean, I'm guessing he's not looking for a fling. He's the kind of guy that gets into a relationship for, I don't know, like you would say, light years.
I would not say that. No one would say that. A light year is a unit of distance, not time.
Thank you for the clarification.
You see, people hear the word year and they think duration. A foot-pound has the same problem. That's a unit of work, not of weight.
Right, thanks.
It's a common mistake.
Not the first one I've made today.
So you're wondering, do you learn science from this show? Do you learn to make fun of scientists? Are you going to be tested at the end of the show on what a foot-pound is? I actually am very much in awe of this show because they have somehow managed to take many of the people I grew up with and make them lovable instead of just irritating, which is what they all were back then. And so when Sheldon is talking about science, everything he's saying is correct. It's CBS, it's not PBS. The show is not expecting us to come away from it with a good knowledge of science, but somehow you do sometimes pick up a little bit. You're wondering what's going on with Sheldon and why he felt the need to be so precise when Penny was just asking a more general question, and the answer is that Sheldon has a condition. Some people have noticed similarities between that and the autism spectrum, but the creators of the show assure us it's just Sheldon being Sheldon-y.
Now that you and I are friends again, I am at your disposal. And frankly, lending my name and reputation to it will help, because a lot of people think that you're a washed-up has-been. Or dead.
I should be so lucky.
So, what do you say?
You know, if it's all the same with you, I think I'll stick with Leonard.
Yeah. It's because I'm annoying, right? I know it is. Say it. Say it. Say, I'm annoying.
Didn't I?
Yeah, now say it. Arthur, say it. Say, I'm annoying. Say it. Say it. I'm annoying. Say it.
You're annoying.
Wow, that really hurt.
And what was your question?
I was going to say Sheldon's been tested.
Sheldon has, his mother had him tested. That's correct. That's a recurring gag. These folks don't just live in a vacuum. They actually live in a real place. Their address comes up often on the show. Here's an example.
Yes, hello. This is Dr. Sheldon Cooper. I'm at 2311 North Los Robles Avenue. I'd like to report a dangerous wild animal. A blue jay.
Sheldon says Los Robles. The inhabitants of Pasadena, California tend to say Los Robles, but it is really Pasadena, California, and here is Los Robles or Los Robles. That's the south section. This is the north section. He lives at 2311. Why do I care so much about this? Because the creators of the show seem to care so much about it. They care so much about it, they gave him an address that doesn't exist. I went all the way up north Los Robles, and I got to 2061, and then I was in Altadena, and that was the end of the numbering on Los Robles. But this is some kind of it's sort of an apartment building mixed with a strip mall called Hen's Teeth Square, and I don't know, I like the name. I don't know why they did that. There is one episode in which they have actually a real address in Pasadena, California.
I've also sent Amy a relationship termination notice and changed my cell phone number and email address.
What if she just comes over?
She'll get lost. We no longer live at 2311 Los Robles. We now live at 311 Los Robles.
So, of course, like a good fan, I went to 311 Los Robles, and it is this imposing edifice, something straight out of Men in Black, So I stepped back a little bit to take a more realistic shot of it. That's a little utility box over there. Even Leonard couldn't fit into it. You're wondering why I'm talking about their address when this talk is supposed to be about science. We will get to it. The view out their window is actually some buildings in the real Pasadena, California. On the left is the iconic dome of City Hall, and on the right is a building that is actually about a mile away from City Hall, but thanks to the miracle of telephoto lenses, it appears to be right next to it. Okay, let's get into the science.
It's like some serious stuff. Leonard, did you do this?
Actually, that's my work.
Wow.
Yeah, well, there's just some quantum mechanics with a little string theory doodling around the edges. That part there, that's just a joke. It's a spoof of the Born-Oppenheimer approximation.
This is really impressive.
I have a board. If you like boards, this is my board.
Holy smokes.
These guys don't just do this for fun. They actually have jobs doing this. They work at a place that is in Pasadena, California, where a lot of smart people work.
I keep thinking about how cool it would be if I called my mom and told her that I got tenure at Caltech.
She'd be proud, huh?
Oh, very. Assuming she takes my call.
He mentioned Caltech. That is a real place. It is not Caltech, the San Antonio programming house. It is not Caltech, the Quebec calibration company. It is not Caltech, the auto body repair shop in Milpitas. And I probably don't have to tell you that it is not Caltech, the construction company in East Timor. It is actually the California Institute of Technology. No, not the Southern California Institute of Technology, which is this building in Anaheim. The real California Institute of Technology. You may have seen it on movies or TV. You may have seen it in the opening credits of Legally Blonde. Or you may have seen it pretty recently on Modern Family, where they even called it Caltech, or on Mission Impossible some decades ago. It was even used very often as a filming location for the show Numbers, which was a procedural drama about an FBI agent and his brother, the mathematician, who was much smarter than him and did all of his work for him, basically. And I found out from personal experience that if you hang around on a street corner long enough, you too can appear in Numbers as splodgy blotch of pixels number 2. Do you see it now? The show, The Big Bang Theory, has been on for 8 seasons, and only once have they ever actually filmed at Caltech, which was this scene where Sheldon presents his work to the legendary Stephen Hawking playing himself. It's not entirely clear what Sheldon does all the time. If he really were working at Caltech, he would be a professor. He can't just hide himself away in an office and be brilliant. But we know he's not a graduate student, although he does sort of grad student type hard labor from time to time. Leonard and Sheldon are lifting a box up their staircase in their building, and you can sort of see on the right-hand side the stairs come up from below. On the left-hand side they go up above, then they turn around behind and continue on up. The elevator has been out of order since the pilot. There are no plans for it to be in order. They live on the 4th floor, so there's quite a lot of walking up and down the stairs. The stairs are at a 30-degree angle, which is very nice because it gives them the opportunity to talk about signs of angles. And their apartment, in this case, is just off the screen to the right. Penny's apartment is just off the screen to the left. Down at the bottom, weird things are going on because here we are in the lobby. The stairs are coming down. The stairs do not go down into the basement on the right, but there is way over, I'll see if my little laser pointer works, way over here, this building, this says stairway. And apparently, by going through that door, you can suddenly drop 8 feet and be on the stairs that go down to the basement. Although, interestingly, the episode before this one, that same door said maintenance, and there was a maintenance bucket outside. So, okay, I'm a little fixated on this apartment building, but I'll tell you why. It doesn't have anything to do with science, but it's, you know, they give the address, and it's right there in Pasadena, and people weirder than me have actually gone around the streets of Pasadena trying to find this place. And there's quite a healthy online, I shouldn't say healthy, but they're active, online community talking about, oh, I know those guys, or I know that apartment building, or I totally used to live there. And so I thought it would be helpful if we could actually figure out where it was. Now, there's one episode where we actually see a bird's eye view of the apartment building. Spoiler, they get married. Okay, if you missed it, we will zoom back in. I don't know how good your Southern California geography is, but here we go. Oh, and incidentally, you may notice, or you probably already knew, that if you play Vivaldi's Spring backwards, it sounds like the beginning of Trumpet Voluntary, which is another popular wedding song. I just throw that out there for you. Well, the first six notes anyway. All right, here we are. Unfortunately, this is not Los Robles, or Los Robles. This is actually Madison Avenue, and Los Robles is over here. But I'm not discouraged. I think we still might be able to find it. Here's Leonard talking to his mom.
I think you'll find my work pretty interesting. I'm attempting to replicate the dark matter signal found in sodium iodide crystals by the Italians.
So no original research?
No.
Well, what's the point of my seeing it? I could just read the paper the Italians wrote.
Hey, that was real science, replicating the dark matter signal found in sodium iodide crystals by the Italians. And I told you before that the writers of the show did not have science degrees. Okay, here's what that script page actually looks like. I think you'll find this pretty interesting. I'm attempting to replicate the brackets science to come, close brackets. This happens in every script. And the reason is because we don't really know what the science is going to be until a professional comes in and tells us. Fortunately, the Big Bang Theory has a professional. He got one cameo.
My girlfriend, Bernadette. My girlfriend, Bernadette.
Who are all those people?
I have no idea.
I'll wind it back so you can catch him, because it's a blink and miss it. The gentleman with the critical look on the right there is David Saltzburg. He is actually a particle astrophysicist at UCLA. And his job is to look at every script and fill in something for science to come, and also correct things that look like they are not actually good science, which has happened occasionally. He's a very busy man. Because of him, there is a book about the science of the Big Bang Theory. If he weren't there and the Big Bang Theory were nothing but dilithium crystals and holodecks and infinite improbability drives and sonic screwdrivers, there wouldn't really be anything to write about. The longest word in Shakespeare, you think I'm changing gears, is honorificabilitudinitatibus, and David Saltzburg's personal honorificabilitudinitatibus, and I just won $5 for using that twice in the same sentence, comes in this episode.
You know, I gotta ask, why didn't you just get a license at 16 like everybody else?
I was otherwise engaged.
Doing what?
Examining perturbative amplitudes in n equals 4 supersymmetric theories, leading to a re-examination of the ultraviolet properties of multi-loop n equals 8 supergravity using modern twist-door theory.
Well, how about when you were 17?
Okay. So that whole paragraph there was originally, of course, science to come in brackets. And David Saltzburg took a lot of grief from people because they said you were just going through your thesaurus, throwing in all these science words. But that actually was the title of a paper that a friend of his was working on at the time. So he tossed that in there. Saltzburg himself did some research and included it on those whiteboards that you have seen sort of hovering in the background. And in one case, he worked on a problem for several months and then realized to his horror that he was off by a factor of 10 to the 25th. Oops. But no sense in wasting the work, so he put that on a whiteboard as well, and you have to be quick to notice the little frowny face. Oops. I'm sorry. Here we
go. Raj, have you seen Howard?
I think he's eating lunch. Sheldon, I want you to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson from the Hayden Planetarium in New York.
I'm quite familiar with Dr. Tyson. He's responsible for the demotion of Pluto from planetary status. I liked Pluto. Ergo, I do not like you.
But I actually didn't demote Pluto. That was a vote of the International Astronomical Union.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Think about that, Dr. Tyson.
Is that the guy you were telling me about?
Oh, yeah.
So that's Neil deGrasse Tyson really playing himself. There have been several luminaries from the science world who have appeared on the show. There have also been people playing people from other than the science world. And Leonard, who, as I mentioned, is an experimental physicist, will now give us a demonstration of how not to talk to an FBI agent.
You work with Mr. Wolowitz here at the university, correct?
Yes. Of course, we're in different departments. He's an engineer and I'm an experimental physicist. You know, one of those guys who examines the building blocks of creation and says, "Hello, maker of the universe." I see what you did there. Good one.
Right.
Right. The reason that I bring that up is because experimental physics in many ways is easier to grasp if you are not an experimental physicist than theoretical physics is if you are not a theoretical physicist. So to the extent that this show can actually appeal to people who are not physicists of any kind, Leonard probably has a better shot at it than Sheldon does. Here's Leonard doing a classic experiment, first done by Galileo under slightly different circumstances.
feet.
Okay, that's pretty cool. He did that in his head, even though he obviously had other things on his mind. He dropped the bottle, and 2.1 seconds later, he heard it go smash. Yes, I timed it. And he did all that in his head, and he came out with 30 feet. Great. You can use that to start teaching a kid about, d equals 1/2 AT squared. The only problem is that after 2.1 seconds, any object starting at rest will fall 70 feet, not 30 feet. You did that in your head, didn't you? So actually, I don't want to pick on the sound effects guy, but Leonard actually kind of didn't get it right, or he lives in an apartment building, stay with me, where things fall slower in elevator shafts than they do elsewhere. See, this apartment building, I'm really fixated on it. Check out what happens when you throw stuff out the window.
I need to use your window.
Oh, hey, yeah, no, sure, go ahead.
Hey, jerkface, you forgot your iPod!
It hit the ground after falling 4 feet.
It just won't coalesce. Maybe you need a fresh start. You're right.
It's a great idea, Leonard. Thank you.
Okay, even if there weren't any air resistance on that whiteboard, the best it could do in that short amount of time between when he threw it and when we heard the smash and the honk is it could fall to about the middle of the 3rd floor if he's living on the 4th floor. So I guess what that means is we're looking for an apartment building where the traffic runs at the 3rd floor level. But I'm convinced that we can find this apartment building. Here's what it looks like from the outside. A little bit hard to see here, but here are the main doors. On the left is a storefront, and on the right is another storefront. So this is a very narrow apartment building. On the ground floor, we have 16 mailboxes. Presumably, if we have 2 apartments per floor, that means it's an 8-story building, which actually is a violation of zoning ordinances in Pasadena, but maybe they got some kind of a special dispensation, I don't know. It does have kind of a weird front door because the security system is not really what you would expect. The door swings both ways.
To have you hanging off my ankle like some kind of ball and chain.
Not really sure if there's any point in locking it if you can just push it. Penny coming through the other door actually demonstrates one of the weirdest features, which is that she will come through this door, go up the stairs, and then go into her apartment by going directly in the opposite direction of the way she's going now, which means that all the apartments on her side of the building hang out over the street. I guess that's possible. I don't know. When you look through, you can't really tell what's happening here, but Sheldon is standing in his kitchen, and we're looking through his kitchen window, and we see a brick building behind him. That brick, if you actually do make a blueprint of the, yes, I did, of the apartment, you see that that's actually the back of Leonard's closet. So this apartment has a little outside space somehow built into it. Okay, at this point, I didn't know what to do, so I wrote to City Hall, and I actually heard back from the mayor himself. Bill Bogard, the mayor of Pasadena, explained to me what I had been missing, and I will quote him. He said, "Pasadena is home to some of the most brilliant people in the world." And then he listed several of them in several of the institutions, including JPL and Idea Lab, the Planetary Society. And also he mentioned some of the architects who have left their imprint, such as Green and Green and Myron Hunt. Then he said, "With this much scientific and architectural talent in the most economically and ethnically diverse city in the state, it is not surprising to me to find an apartment building that's bigger on the inside." So the mayor, obviously a Doctor Who fan, and that's all. We just need to be looking for a TARDIS. Changing subjects for a moment.
What you watching?
I don't know. Raj sent me some video of Buzz Aldrin.
Here you go. It's a Milky Way. The Milky Way's a galaxy in space. I've been in space. Here's a Mars bar. I'm an astronaut. And this one's a moon pie. I walked on the moon. What have you done?
Okay, I get it.
It's always sad when your heroes turn out to be jerks, but that really was Buzz Aldrin playing himself as a jerk, which was very sweet of him. This is Buzz Aldrin actually doing his job. Back during the Apollo 11 mission, he walked on the moon and he placed this object here, which in higher resolution looks like that. That's a retroreflector array. Each of those little cells is actually 3 mirrors at 90-degree angles to each other and has the property that any light going into it comes back out in the exact opposite direction. This is useful if you want to, say, bounce a light off of the moon from the Earth and time its flight, and then divide by 2 and figure out how far away the moon is, because the moon is not a single distance away, it's always changing. And they do that very experiment in one episode of The Big Bang Theory. An experiment that they don't do is this, where Leonard is upset with Sheldon, who's in the back of his car. I happen to notice that this crane thing here and these stairs and this stuff here that you see out Leonard's window, you also see in his rearview mirror in exactly the same formation, not even reversed. So that's not a retroreflector. I think that's probably a rushed post-production supervisor, but I just call that to your attention in case you were wondering about it. There's a lot about science that is hard to understand and a lot that is hard to explain even if you do understand it. And one of the things that comes up a lot on The Big Bang Theory is this one.
All right, what response on my part would bring this conversation to a speedy conclusion?
Tell me whether or not to go through with the date.
Schrodinger's cat.
Wow, that's brilliant.
You sound surprised.
I think most people have a conception of Schrodinger's cat. It's something about you put a cat in a box and you threaten its life and you go away, and then until you open the box, you don't know whether the cat died or not. Which is a bit of a simplification because you kind of learned that at your first birthday, right? Until you open the box, you don't know what's in it. So it's more subtle than that. I will not do justice to it, but I'll just say that if you could somehow isolate the contents of the box from everything in the universe, then you can't really say what's in the box. It's not a question of, is the cat alive or dead? I just don't know. There's no thing in there to talk about. It's kind of like, what cat? It's kind of like...
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is.
Yes. And I'm not taking a cheap shot there. Like, what is in the box? Not only don't we know, but it has no meaning. You could say there's a live cat. You could say there's a dead cat. You could say there's a cat wearing a gas mask that it wove for itself out of hairballs. You could say there's 2 cats discussing politics with an iguana in Esperanto. I mean, you don't know. It's not a thing that you could know if only you knew. There isn't any way to know it. I didn't do a very good job of that. Perhaps Sheldon can do it better.
Sheldon, can you grab me water?
Possibly.
Can you or can't you?
It's not that simple, Leonard.
It never is it?
At this moment, our relationship exists in 2 mutually contradictory states. Until you either do not go or go to Will Wheaton's party, you are simultaneously my friend and not my friend. I'm characterizing this phenomenon as Schrodinger's friendship.
Got it. Can I have my water?
No, of course. Now get it yourself, you traitor.
what is going on?
In case you have forgotten, Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment.
I didn't forget. There's this cat in a box, and until you open it, it's either dead or alive or both. Although back in Nebraska, our cat got stuck in my brother's camp trunk, and we did not need to open it to know there was all kinds of dead cat in there.
Okay, so I don't want to gross everybody out by continuing this discussion of cats warm and cold, but believe it or not, it is possible to take something as cold and difficult to wrap your head around as Schrodinger's cat and turn it into a pretty beautiful statement on personal relationships. And so if you will indulge me, we will let Sheldon take one more crack at it in a way that, although it still doesn't get any closer to the science, does perhaps get closer to the heart.
Sheldon, do you have anything to say that has anything to do with, what I'm talking about?
Well, let's see. We might consider Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger. Is that the woman in 2A?
No, that's Mrs. Grossinger. And she doesn't have a cat. She has a Mexican hairless, annoying little animal. Yip, yip, yip.
Sheldon!
Sorry, you diverted me. Anyway, in 1935, Erwin Schrödinger, in an attempt to explain the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics, he proposed an experiment where a cat is placed in a box with a sealed vial of poison that will break open at a random time. Now, since no one knows when or if the poison has been released, until the box is opened, the cat can be thought of as both alive and dead.
I'm sorry, I don't get the point.
Well, of course you don't get it. I haven't made it yet. You have to be psychic to get it, and there's no such thing as psychic.
Sheldon, what's the point?
Just like Schrodinger's cat, your potential relationship with Leonard right now can be thought of as both good and bad. It is only by opening the box that you'll find out which it is.
Okay, so you're saying I should go out with Leonard?
No. Let me start again. In 1935...
This could go on forever, so we will move along.
This is kind of a big thing. The keynote address is being delivered by George Smoot.
Oh, my God. The George Smoot?
You've heard of him?
Of course I haven't.
George Smoot is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, one of the great minds of our time. His work in black body form and anisotropy of the cosmic microwave background radiation cemented our understanding of the origin of the universe.
It's kind of a funny name, though. Smoot.
It's like talking to a chimp.
And just in case you were wondering, they didn't just use Smoot's name, they used Smoot.
I'm thinking, you won the Nobel Prize, 3 years ago? So you must deal with a whole lot of what has Smoot done lately. My thought is, we continue my research as a team, Cooper, Smoot, alphabetical, and when we win the Nobel Prize, you'll be back on top.
With all due respect, Dr. Cooper, are you on crack?
Fine, Smoot Cooper. Wow, what a diva.
The history of that is that George Smoot is a fan of the show, called them up and said, "Can you work me in?" "Sure you can." And they said, "Okay, can we make fun of your name?" And I think he was used to that, so he said, "Sure." It's a little bit funny that Penny is the character making fun of Smoot's name because diehard fans of the show may know this. Penny is the only character whose name has never been revealed. It's Penny something. We don't know her last name. It may never be revealed. Here's another famous person who called up the show and said, "You can make room for me, can't you?"
As it just so happens, I'm also spending the day with a beloved children's television science personality. Isn't that right, new friend and colleague, Bill Nye, the science guy? Sorry, I replaced you with a newer model.
Wow, Arthur Jeffries, it's an honor to meet you. My show never would have happened without yours.
That's what I told my lawyers.
Mr. Nye, hello. I'm sorry he got you involved in this nonsense.
He said I'd be speaking to a class.
Well, no, I said you were teaching someone a lesson. Now let's go.
I personally can't imagine spending more than a couple of minutes with Sheldon, but I have met people who would love to meet him if only he were a real person, and I don't follow that. Sheldon, at one point, is fixated on Halle Berry and some of the other people who have played Catwoman.
She's like my fourth favorite Catwoman.
No kidding.
Yeah, Julie Newmar, Michelle Pfeiffer, Eartha Kitt, and then her.
What about Lee Merriweather?
Oh, I forgot about Lee Merriweather.
Well, I'm glad that's settled.
That makes Halle Berry my 5th favorite Catwoman. It's Julie Newmar, Michelle Pfeiffer, Eartha Kitt, Lee Merriweather.
Please, I'm begging you, go to sleep.
I'm trying. I'm counting Catwomen.
I contacted Julie Newmar, who had not been aware of that particular scene, and while I was researching that, I discovered that her older brother had gone to Caltech in the early 1960s when she was, her younger brother, when she was already an actress, and she had gone to visit him at one time in his dorm room. I'm not making this up. You'll see why I said that in a moment. There is a photo of her in the 1962 volume of the California Tech, which is the student newspaper. So here's Julie Newmar, her brother, and 3 would-be swains. And I just found the parallels between that and season 3 of the Big Bang Theory official photo to be a little creepy. I've asked her about that and she has not responded. The most famous science experiment, even beyond Schrodinger's cat, is probably the double slit experiment, and that is the one where you have 2 slits in a board and you pass light through it, and the light acts like a wave unless you're trying to catch it being a particle, and then it acts like a particle. And the same thing happens if you try to pass particles through, and whenever you're not trying to catch the particles being particles, they act like waves, and it makes everybody scratch their heads, and I'm not going to begin to try to explain it now, because I still don't understand it, but I can tell you that the readers of Physics World magazine voted it the most beautiful experiment of all time. So if you thought the words beautiful and experiment could not appear together in a sentence, the readers of Physics World would disagree with you. It gives me a little bit of a flutter to realize that the very first words spoken in the first episode of the first season of The Big Bang Theory were on this exact topic. Here is the opening shot from the pilot.
So if a photon is directed through a plane with 2 slits in it and either slit is observed, it will not go through both slits. If it's unobserved, it will. However, if it's observed after it's left the plane but before it hits its target, it will not have gone through both slits.
Agreed. What's your point?
There's no point. I just think it's a good idea for a t-shirt.
I applaud the creators of the show for opening with something that abstruse. And I would love to direct you to a resource where you can read more about this. This resource doesn't yet physically exist, however, but it's coming out in June. So if you are curious about other aspects of science on the show, and if you would like to find out where exactly that apartment building really turns out to be, you may find that in there. Thank you all so much for your attention, and I'd love to take questions. Or not. I will point something out to the diehards. The foreword is by Howard Wolowitz. Howard Wolowitz is the name of the character you saw handing a juice box to Penny early on. Howard Wolowitz is also a real person. He's a friend of one of the creators of the show. And when they were putting the show together, Bill Prady, the co-creator, wrote to him and said, "Can we please use your name? It's the perfect name for a nerd." And Wolowitz, bless him, said, "Sure, why not?" So I got in touch with him and said, "Can you write something funny about what it's like to have a nerdy character named after you?" And he happily did that. Yes. Oh, you get a prize for asking a question. I can't give you a book, but I can give you a bookmark. You could have had that. Yes.
There was a tale I remember hearing about the problems on the different whiteboards throughout the show, that the professor who supplied those actually used them in his exams, and he made the comment that if his students had just watched the show, they would have passed the exam. Can you put any validity to that?
Even if it's not true, it should be, but that's absolutely right. That professor is allowed to bring one guest to each taping, and that particular time he brought his entire introductory physics class, and they all sat there and gradually realized with some amount of horror that what he had put on the whiteboards was the answers to the physics test. Absolutely right. Yes.
So, as somebody that watches the show fairly frequently, it surprises me the number of real-life scientists or people involved in science that are on it. What do you think the the interest is for other people unrelated to the show to appear?
So the question is, what do I think is the reason that scientists are so interested in this show and try to be on it? Stephen Hawking, for instance, has played himself about 6 times, sometimes just in voiceovers, but also actually on the show. Hawking gave me a quote to use in the book, and it was so simple and so elegant and so impossible for me to pick apart that I could actually use your help figuring it out. I wrote to him and I said, "Dear Dr. Hawking, I'm just this science humorist and I'm doing this book about this show. Would you care to maybe say something about it?" And he wrote back, and you know it's hard for Stephen Hawking to write, so I was grateful to get anything from him. He wrote, "At last, a show that makes physics cool." I don't see cool physicists on this show. I see kind of freaky physicists on this show, but they're struggling to be cool. And so maybe it's more about the struggle than about the actual accomplishment. You know, I don't know that kids watching this show, or maybe teenagers, are thinking, that's what I want to be. I want to be Sheldon and annoy everybody and then put my consciousness into some orbiting satellite and then just, be the ruler of the world. But for whatever reason, it touches that human nerve, and hey, scientists are humans too. And scientists do not walk around with all the answers. You all know this. They walk around with lots of great questions. Yes?
An online question saying, is the biology on the serial, Amy and Bernadette, real as well, or do they make it up?
The biology, that Amy and Bernadette pursue, is it real? So the characters of Amy and Bernadette, you saw Bernadette briefly, you saw Amy even more briefly. The actor who plays Amy has a PhD in neurobiology in real life from UCLA. Her name is Mayim Bialik. And when she is doing research, they often show scenes where she is sectioning a brain or probing a starfish. She is able to use her experience to, for instance, not cut her finger off, which is good. I believe they also take some liberties. I know for a fact they take some liberties because there's one scene where she is poking a starfish and going, "I'm stimulating its pleasure centers." And for an animal that doesn't even have a brain, it's sort of impossible to find any kind of pleasure centers. So that's me editorializing. She doesn't say that part. The other character, that's Amy. So the other character, Bernadette, we never actually see her research. We just know that she works in pharmaceutics, making scary things or possibly isolating scary things. And yes, there are scary bugs out there in the real world, so that's as true as it can be. Yes?
It says the unauthorized guide. Did you reach out to the creators, and if so, were they helpful in researching this?
The reason it says the unauthorized guide is because in order for this to be an authorized guide, and I feel kind of like I don't want my mom to see this, it's like a smudge, but for it to be an authorized guide, it would have to be basically written by people under contract to Warner Brothers and Chuck Lorre Productions. They are not at this time interested in coming out with a book like this, so the only alternative is to do it as unauthorized. They have not sent me a cease and desist, so I'm happy. You know what? You can have a bookmark for that question. There's no way to pass it back to you. You'll have to get it from one of your neighbors. Okay. Yes, back there.
Future plans. Any plans to write a book on the science of the other highest rated scripted show, The Walking Dead?
Do I want to write about The Walking Dead? I hope I won't offend anybody. There's Schrodinger and there's zombies. And I don't know that zombies don't exist. But I did so much research on real science here, it would really be hard to do research on sort of the other side. I need to kind of know. Yes?
You've never been in contact with the actual authors of the show, with the producers or anything, right?
I have been to a taping. I made friends with a crew member, got into a taping, sat up in the stratosphere with the guy who runs the lights, and learned a lot about the show that way. And I'll just jump in and say, several people criticize shows like this because of the laugh track. I can assure you that they do not use a laugh track on Big Bang Theory. Those sorts of shows are always taped in front of an audience of approximately the size of this room, crowded together for 5 hours, freezing in the air conditioning because the lights are so hot. And I know this because, I know that they don't sweeten it because I deliberately laughed at the wrong time at one point, and then I heard it in my episode. So it's not a laugh track. There's no need for a laugh track. It's much better to get real live people.
Well, the reason I ask is there's oddities that I'm just curious of the explanation. Like, for example, the now late Mrs. Wolowitz was never actually shown on screen.
Yes.
Except briefly, very briefly, where you couldn't even see her in that wedding scene.
Right.
And I'm just wondering what the deal is.
Howard's mother does not ever appear on screen. The character just recently passed. So you're asking about why does she never appear on screen? Why did Hitchcock appear in every one of his movies, just do a little cameo? Because it's fun, I think. I think it was fun for them to have Mrs. Wolowitz not ever be quite there. Why was the neighbor in Home Improvement never seen below the... And I went to a taping of that as well, and you know what? He's a little short guy. He's like this tall, and then he has feet on the bottom. Okay, anyway, it's what TV people do. I make no apologies for them. Yes?
Question?
Okay, one more question. Yes?
Simon Singh wrote a book on the
Simpsons.
Secrets of the Simpsons.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there's any parallels you can draw from it or something that you...
Parallels, wow. Simon Singh's book that came out on the mathematics of The Simpsons, he did that in collaboration with the crew that makes The Simpsons. Simpsons has many more episodes than Big Bang Theory. Simon Singh is much more prolific and much smarter than I am. He's a much better writer. All you're doing is finding differences. Thanks for your question. Thank you all for your questions and your attention.